We were one of the first gravity-fed wineries. We do everything in-house, processing, bottling, labeling, fulfillment. Everything is conducted on site. We have embraced biodynamic farming, and that is just an incremental increase in manpower. We use no pre-emergent herbicides. For weed control, we use fire. My team literally dons backpacks, and they flame the weeds between the rows.
Welcome to the Blackberry Podcast, where we share stories, wisdom, and insight from the amazing people we get to meet and collaborate with here at Blackberry Farm. I'm Sarah Chabot, and today we have a very special episode located right here in the Keep, which is the wine cellar under Brimble Hall at Blackberry Farm. And my co-host today is Mr. Andy Chabot.
Hi.
Yeah. And our guest is Bettina Bryant. Bettina Bryant's path to wine country began in the arts. As a dancer with the American Ballet Theater, an art historian, curator, and documentary film producer. Since joining Bryant Estate in 2007 and becoming proprietor and president in 2014, she's led one of Napa Valley's most celebrated wineries with a philosophy rooted in exceptional craftsmanship, stewardship of the land, and holistic approach to farming. Thank you for being with us today, Bettina.
Thank you for having me.
You're here over the next couple of days, sharing your wines, your story with the guests here at Blackberry. And so thank you for sitting down with the podcast. And we're going to dig in a little bit more to your story and the story of the estate and the wines.
Perfect.
So let's start right at the beginning. You were raised born and raised in Nashville. So you're a local.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about growing up kind of here in the South in Nashville and having, these immigrant parents that probably brought such a world-class world view and where that led you to dance and beyond.
Yeah, well, my father was a neuropsychopharmacologist, and he landed at Vanderbilt University, where he taught in the medical school and conducted a lot of research. But I was born in Nashville, so, the summer humidity is very familiar.
You're feeling it.
Yeah, but it was an interesting blending of two worlds, just that Southern hospitality outside, but in the home, my mother, we had Biedermeier furniture. We only listened to classical music, and I studied music and then ballet, and eventually became professional.
A typical Nashville upbringing.
Typical Nashville upbringing.
Skip the country music and go straight to classical.
I love country music, though.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of speaks a bit to the merging of so many interests for you. But do you feel like one artistry led to the next?
I really credit my mother. She was just an avid historian. Whenever we traveled, we were always going to museums or historic registries. Monticello. She just was incredibly, I think she was more American than many Americans. I mean, she really embraced the ideals. And I grew up, in museums all the time and, visiting historic sites.
And having that early appreciation for learning and discovering something both new and old at the same time had to have been, such a solid foundation for that too.
Yeah, I'm so grateful.
So your time dancing there, it's such a precision art, but also combines feeling too. I feel like, just assuming, because I've never really danced, line danced maybe, but I've never really
You've never
danced.
Classically trained ballet dancer?
No.
I see.
But I've never done that level of dancing or winemaking, but it seems like there is a through line of precision and feeling at the same
they
time.
definitely inform one another. And I think, I love the discipline of ballet. I, of course, studied other forms of dance. I did modern dance and tap and jazz. But, it was really having the opportunity to be on stage with a visiting company that opened my eyes to the world of performance and to, high-level music and an environment that was, light and shadow and drama. And I was incredibly shy as a child, and that really allowed me to transcend that shyness. So I was really captivated.
Do you find you sort of got to escape into performance, if that makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I definitely think it gave me confidence. inhabiting a different persona than myself was really exciting, and I just loved theater and, reading Shakespeare and, just you could be something other than yourself.
Once you finished up your professional career as a dancer, you went on to study at Columbia in art history.
Well, originally I was intending to go to law school. I thought I was going to go on that path because I have a pretty analytic aspect to myself. But of course, I took the requisite art history course, and there's a tremendous faculty at Columbia, and I just fell headlong, and I had to acknowledge that, art was just, talk about through lines. I mean, art has just been a through line of my life. I apply it in my daily living. And of course, as we start talking about wine, sort of how I've integrated that into how we craft our wines and also, the presentation of them.
Was there a particular piece or artist during your time at Columbia that was like, oh, this is the one that's clinched me into this?
Oh, God, so many. I was a modernist, but I studied ancient Greek and Roman art. I had the opportunity to work with some exceptional collectors in New York with their private collection. They were big supporters of the Metropolitan Museum. Right. So to have that kind of intimate view into, they were following the Silk Route and had Cycladic figurines and, they had a bronze room and Hellenistic jewelry. And I just thought, what is this? I was just completely captivated. And from there, I ended up working with a number of private collectors. And I thought, this is just so interesting to be able to drop into their world. I worked with a contemporary collector who had a lot of Warhol and Jean-Michel Basquiat, another one who collected contemporary African art. So it was just endless rabbit holes.
And I'm just guessing at this, so steer me back in the right direction. But not only, we're kind of getting back to both feeling and precision again in collection or curation of art, right? Like there has to be a love for the piece, but then also the analytical approach to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, different collectors collect for different reasons. I definitely respond to collectors who have that true passion. My husband, Don, was just, he would fall headlong in love with pieces and had beautiful relationships with artists. There were other collectors for whom it was an asset, and it was a very calculated move, determining was this going to increase in value. It was a real strong calculus.
Yeah. So let's get into the wine side of things, and while you're here at Blackberry, so you're in the world of art, and then you find yourself in Napa Valley. Take us there.
Well, I would go back a little bit just with my parents from Switzerland in a very mountainous region called Graubünden, and it's a very well-known Pinot Noir producing region. So wine was definitely present in my home, but really more on special occasions. Fast forward to New York, I just was living in a really fast world. I was dating someone who was an art dealer, and he poured really incredible wines at his openings. And there was a funny story actually where he thought he had lost a case of Bryant Family Vineyard wine when we were out in the Hamptons, and I just thought, what is this obsession?
Like, why would this be such an issue?
And fast forward, I was in Venice, Italy at the Biennale, which is this extraordinary fair that takes over the entire city every 2 years. It just opened recently. And in fact, Bryant is a sponsor of one of the pavilions there, of a Peruvian indigenous artist. We can get back to that in a little bit, but that was where I met Don. And it took Don and I a good decade of just these wild encounters. I would be at a museum with my father, and I'd turn around and there was Don Bryant. And as you know, Don really founded one of the really significant wineries. He acquired the land in the 80s. First vintage of Bryant Family Vineyard was released in 1992. I had dinner with him for the first time in 2007, and thus began just this crazy journey of, he took me to the vineyard within a month, and I was sitting at the table with Michel Roland doing a blending session. It was an absolute pinch me moment of like, how did I get here? But you think about fate in life, and, we had just an incredible time of learning. He was just so generous with me, opening bottles of wine and talking, through his sort of business approach and collecting, and it was just a tremendous gift.
I'm interested to know what drove Don into the world of wine. What was his desire to have a vineyard, to make it a world-class vineyard, which it is. I mean, anyone that knows fine wine knows Bryant Estate.
It was complete serendipity.
Yeah.
He was traveling there in the 80s and purchased a piece of land to build a home for his family, which happened to be on Pritchard Hill.
Right.
It's where the winery physically sits right now. And he had young children at the time, and he was launching his insurance business, and he thought, this is really impractical. I'm not going to be spending a lot of time here with my family. But he said, why don't I just buy a vineyard? How difficult could that be? And he would say to me, it's a good thing he didn't know how hard it would be, because he almost threw in the towel a few times. I mean, it's challenging to be a long distance, proprietor of a living, breathing site. But he was very determined. But preceding that, I would say that he was already collecting wine,
so he's a
with
wine
great
collector
passion.
as well.
And Bordeaux was very strong in his cellar.
Sure.
So he almost threw in the towel, and then he decided he was going to look for a full-time winemaker, and that's when he and Helen Turley were introduced. So she joined the estate in 1992, and within a few years, it was just perfect timing.
Yeah, and those years were a lot had changed in Napa, it seems, in those years, with sort of clonal changes in Cabernet because of phylloxera that had kind of had struck a lot of the vineyards in Napa. And so that 90 to 95 time frame was like a formative time frame in Napa.
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
Robert coming on and everything kind of shifting a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of, at that time there were maybe 50 to 60 wineries in totality in the valley, and when I arrived, it was 10x. So that rapid expansion. So he had a lot of visibility, fortunately, and determination. And when he received that first true recognition with the 1997 vintage, it's wonderful, because he turned to Helen Turley and he said, what can I do to be even better? He had just received his first 100 points, which I would argue that was maybe a time when 100 points really meant something.
It's definitely fewer and further between. Back then, if ever, really.
Yeah. And she said, Don, control the process from beginning to end. And he had the adjacent land. It was contiguous to the vineyard. So he built a winery, which shocks me. He did that in 2 years.
That'd
it
be
was
tough
completed
these
for
days,
the. Oh my God! It took me 5 years just to complete a big renovation.
Renovation. Oh, wow.
And so now we were one of the first gravity-fed wineries at the time. We do everything in-house, certainly all processing, bottling, labeling, fulfillment. Everything is conducted on site.
Share with me what gravity-fed winery is.
I mean, you can join me in on this as well, but the thinking is that it almost looks like a Nautilus shell. The way the fruit arrives to the crush pad, and it goes through multiple sorting processes, and you want to have as little impact on the fruit as possible, so that when it goes finally through the destemmer and down to the tanks, it is as protected as possible.
So it's just always going down through the process,
and trying to not use pumps.
Okay, got it.
So because the mechanical pump could be tough, rough on the wine.
Yeah, I mean, we do press, and Michel Rolland was a big believer that great wine had pressed wine. So,
And then probably at the time, I mean, there were very few people that did that.
For a small winery, the level of attention was rather unusual.
Right, and likely the cost, which is why other small wineries can't.
Yeah, and we've taken it a step further now, because we have embraced biodynamic farming, and that is just, an incremental increase in manpower. We use no pre-emergent herbicides. We use for weed control, we use fire. So my team literally dons backpacks, and they flame the weeds between the rows.
I read that you're using fire, and I thought that was great. The conversion to biodynamics was really your push, yes? Or
I mean, I'm very interested in health and wellness, and I was working on a film in New York touching upon the farming industry, and I just learned a lot about some of the practices that were really precarious for human health, for the health of the soil. And when KK came on board, I really had KK being my winemaker, who's been with us since 2012, and then she came on board as winemaker in 2018, and I had a true kind of partner to implement this, and she's just done an incredible job. I mean, you see, just the vitality in the soil and how that translates to phenolic ripeness and, just overall health across the board.
Explain, if you can, in a simple way, biodynamic practices. I know it's not a simple thing, so I know it's a big ask.
Yeah, and this is maybe perhaps better answered by KK because she's really in the soils. But I mean, in simplicity, it's really about preventive farming. You're utilizing inputs to ward off conditions, and perhaps a bit more on the woo-woo side. I mean, you are following to a degree the lunar cycles, and for example, we did an experiment with cutting of the vines, and on both on the ascending and the descending moon. And when the descending moon occurred, there was much faster recovery with the vine. So that was just a clear-cut example for us that working in harmony with nature was certainly the way we wanted to be.
I think farmers around here just follow the farmer's almanac, but it is also led by the moon too, like when you should plant, when you should cut. Or harvest. Yeah,
it's just really being in tune. I mean, KK has expressed a lot of gratitude that, she's literally on site, and she only, has a few yards to go before she's in the vineyard, and she's, constantly checking, and that's a real privilege.
And soil health, I think, is starting to become, maybe it's because we're personally have a farm, and that's what the algorithm is on my social media is like comes up to me. But there's like a new film out about regenerative farming, and it just seems like it's starting to be a touch more in the like public conversation as well. Yeah. But winemakers have been doing it for centuries.
Many have, like in Italy.
Yeah.
And you said you were following. You're very interested in health and wellness, and we hear the word wellness a lot these days. It's sort of like, this is a trend. This is, I don't know why it's the next big thing, but it's like wellness seems important. Well, what is wellness to you? What is your journey taking you in?
Oh my goodness. In the course of wine?
Well, wine or I just food and wine maybe is a larger topic.
Want to know that what I ingest, what I put on my skin, has pure elements. I mean, as I've become connected to an agricultural endeavor, realizing, you have many choices, and I've witnessed some illness with people that I love, and just want to take the best steps for my own well-being and for those
in your community,
in my community. Yeah, I don't want to be contributing in a harmful way. And extending, we had a tough few years in Napa with the drought. Some of the climatic imbalance. We had to make adjustments. For instance, doing more dry farming, really measuring vine stress, so that we can calibrate our irrigation appropriately so that we're not wasteful. Of course, we had a really cataclysmic year in 2020. It was not just the pandemic. Things were trending quite beautifully in the vineyard, but we had one of the worst fires. We had a very unusual one in August, which, we were okay from that, but then another one at the end of September, and it just laid on top of the vineyards, just a thick smoke, and it bound to the molecules, and we ended up dropping all of our fruit. There were some producers who prevailed and made some good wine, but I just knew I could never release something that I didn't feel was, truly at the level that we aim for all the time.
And what was in 2021, the process of bringing the vineyard back?
So the vineyard itself, other than the lack of water, was relatively untouched. You know, it's very stable. And, you know, we had 7 inches of rain from 20 to 21. And so the berry size was very small. However, the quality was very high. There was, you know, the skin to juice ratio was really, really beautiful. So while we had one of the smallest productions we've ever had, we were just so full of gratitude to have this beautiful wine, which we'll be having this evening. I'm very excited to share that. And after that, you know, the following year, we had probably 47 inches of rain and the water tables were covered. And so, you know, it just really proved to me nature's ability to rebound.
Those are some pretty extreme changes between each season. And as a farmer and a winemaker, you would have to really know how to handle the fruit either way, right?
True. And that's where KK is just so, you know, has such integrity. You know, I've made some capital improvements. I mean, we have close to 1 million gallons of water storage. I put into 400,000 tanks, and then we had some existing. And when the second one went in 2 years ago, KK said, this is a game changer for us. Like, we know during the rainy season, you know, November through like February, we have complete water to take us through the entire year. So it's, you know, we often say failure to prepare is preparing to fail. So it's just always being really, really mindful.
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes, I mean, when you're just talking about preventative farming in biodynamic practices, that's another just preventative,
absolutely,
you know, and a method for where you are in the world and what the climate is doing. And it seems like we just are seeing more bigger climactic occurrences all at once now versus, you know, it might have been more gentle changes in the past. It's sort of like you get all the rain in a 3-year period. It just happens in 1 year. You get all the drought that you would have gotten. It just seems like you have to adapt. And that's what you're doing.
Yeah. Fortunately, we've had some pretty temperate years.
Yeah.
You know, we've had some heat spikes like in 2022. Over Labor Day, we had a 10-day extended heat cycle, which, you know, again, KK really prepared. She pre-irrigated. A lot of people were panic picking in the middle of the day, and she reasoned, you know, to pre-irrigate. We knew that there would probably be some sacrifice, but in the end, we achieved the phenolic ripeness that we were aiming for. So I'm really proud of those wines.
Going from a place of farming and creating and producing to then also blending your love of art back into the whole conversation about wine, you know, whether it's labels or, you know, the beautiful boxes and that sort of thing. Talk to us about like the sort of connective tissue there.
Yeah. I mean, one of the artists, another one that I was endlessly fascinated by is Joseph Cornell, and he does these really, or he's no longer, but these fascinating boxes that just are these worlds of objects. And I think one just sold recently for like $5 million, and it's roughly the size of a wine box. But I would suppose a direct inspiration from the wine perspective would be Mouton Rothschild. You know, they have a label system that they have incredible artists, but I remember looking at the labels thinking, forgive me, Mouton, that the label quality was just a little bit lacking. And I thought, how can I execute something that is much more realistic, more faithful to the actual artwork? So it's been a bit insane. The first artist was a British artist named Rachel Dean, and we did a Cabernet Franc in 2016. And she does these beautiful botanical impressions. And we translated our cover crop botanicals. We printed the cast of the botanicals. We overlaid like a Swiss paper, and we lined the interior of the box. And I ended up releasing that in 2020, right after the fires. And it felt almost like a phoenix rising out of the ashes. It was just this pure white. We engraved the labels. We had people's, the collectors' names calligraphied on the bottles. I mean, it was just, but it felt so good to make something beautiful. And from there, I thought, well, if there's any place where I have a sandbox to play in, it's the Bettina wine. Like, I can't touch the Bryant family vineyard wine. It's just classic. And I remember asking Don, would you ever do a wine label? And he had no interest. So I thought, well, Bettina, I can have some fun there. And the first artist that I worked with was Ed Ruscha, who is arguably one of the most important pop artists. You know, he's out of LA and he does a lot of text-based work. And he had gifted me a drawing with the word now on it. And so we overlaid that word on the label. And I thought, hopefully it'll become an interesting table object and maybe ignite some conversation of people, you know, discussing the label. The second artist is Elliot Puckett, who is she does beautiful calligraphic work. And the piece that we translated was a letterpress work. So it was kind of insane. We hand labeled every single bottle. Oof. Thankfully, it was the 21 vintage, so we had less bottles to work with, but we used a thick paper stock. We hand labeled, and I'm just so excited when I see that. Yeah, my team supported me in that. The third artist is an artist named Walton Ford, and he does, I would say he's very much like a contemporary James Audubon, and I had commissioned a painting from him called Terroir, and we translated that onto the label. And the next artist is very exciting for me. It's a Peruvian indigenous artist who's representing Peru at the Biennale this year, so that will come out this fall, and it's gorgeous. Amazing. It just, so I would say I always have a personal connection with the artists. It's very much a collaboration. It's not just throwing a piece of art on a label. I really think deeply about my relationship with the artists, what their voice is, and how that ties into what we're doing. So it's a very cohesive endeavor.
So you were speaking about indigenous Peruvian artist, and am I right in that that's where you met Don?
No, at the
Venice Biennale.
At the festival.
Yes,
okay.
But it is a full circle moment in many ways. Yeah.
And now you support that as well to this day, or the estate does?
It was really sort of circumstance that the Biennale was unveiling, and I just love this artist, and the fact that she was, making a work for me, it just felt really much in alignment. I'm also the executive producer on a documentary film about her, which I just saw the final cut, or close to final cut, in New York last week. We're submitting to film festivals, and it's a very powerful film. It was very emotional for me. Sarah Flores is her name. She's 76 years old. She forages for all of her material. She makes all of her vegetable dyes, and everything is hand done. The work is astonishing.
Where did you get introduced to her work?
It was actually during the pandemic.
Yeah.
When you're sort of, things are coming through to you on Instagram, and there's a gallery in London called White Cube, and they started presenting her work, and it looks very contemporary. And she's now in major museums. The Metropolitan Museum has her work.
Awesome.
Yeah. And deciding to produce a film, that's a big project, creative project to dive into.
I can't say that it was already in formation, and I heard about it from this wonderful friend of mine named Matteo Norzi. He's Italian. He's done a number of films, and he's an artist himself. And he's really been Sarah's agent and kind of guiding her through the whole process. And it was kind of a no-brainer.
Supporting, telling stories. That's seems to be a through line for you too.
Yeah. And I think, female artists are really getting more recognition today. It wasn't intentional, but my winemaking team is led by a young woman. I have, some pretty exciting female members of my team.
You have an amazing team.
Thank you.
I want to jump back to the wine, if I can, for a second, because you mentioned the Bettina wine, which is a blend that you started, I believe, when did that come about? Maybe I should ask the whole question.
Yeah. So
what wines do you make? I feel lucky. I've gotten to try a number of your wines. I don't think the rest of the world necessarily has, although they're well known.
So the flagship wine is the Bryant family vineyard from our estate. It's a 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. And
100%. And it comes from your estate on Pritchard Hill.
And Don was a big lover of Bordeaux wines. Yeah. And when we were preparing to get married in 2008, we were looking around because he realized that Bryant, in sort of the echelon of wines that it is considered, Screaming Eagle, Dalla Valle, Harlan, Bryant was the only one that was a pure blend,
100%
100% cab. So he wanted to, explore making a Bordeaux blended wine, and that is composed of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Cab Franc. And our vineyard manager at the time, David Abreu, approached us and said, listen, I have arguably the best fruit. And so we took the challenge, and, it was a vastly different blending experience, working with these different components. But, and it's, I think, taken us a few years just to really land on the profile that I think is true to us. It ended up being a surprise that Don named it after me. He secretly trademarked it without me knowing. But it was
Sneaky.
a beautiful wedding gift,
That is
So the first
amazing,
vintage
actually.
of Bettina
Okay.
was 2009, the year we got married.
Okay.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
So that's Bettina. And then you have another blend that is
The
the
DB4.
DB4, named after Don.
Yeah,
I
it's a
believe.
bit of a love letter from him and to him. Interestingly, again, in 2008, if we kind of can sift back in our memory of what was going on, we were preparing, for our wedding, and it was when the Lehman Brothers crash occurred, and Don had, just this requirement to stay on the list because we're so highly allocated. There's not very much wine. He said, you just have to buy one bottle. And he was so worried that people would not be able to afford the wine.
Right.
And he had held on to 3 vintages of the estate fruit. It had been vinified that didn't make the upper cut. And they were in shiners in the cave. And he went, oh my gosh, I have a solution. I can, offer what would arguably be like an entry point wine, which ended up being called the DB4. And it, it has a few reference points.
Right.
The inspiration coming from Don. The 4 blocks in the vineyard are the heart of the vineyard. It just year in and year out, the fruit is just so stunning. And then it also references the 4 varietals in the wine. So, and that has just been I would say the other night when we had the 23, that was the first wine we poured, and people were like,
People
oh my
loved
God.
I mean, you say entry point, but we're talking about Bryant. So it's
and it
an upper level. An amazing entry point.
And we probably put more attention into crafting that blend. The Bryant and the Bettina reveal themselves, and then the remaining components are considered for the DB4. And we work really, really hard to craft something that we're proud of.
Yeah. And now you have a white wine.
We do.
Which I got to try yesterday. So I'm one of, I don't know, there's about 40 people in this event. So there's 40 people now that have gotten to try it.
Yes.
But thank you for sharing it with us. But, if you don't mind to share with the world, what is it?
Yeah. Again, only 100 cases. It's a Sonoma Mountain Chardonnay. KK and I discovered that we have a mutual love of Chardonnay, and it was really a fun exploration. Yesterday, we did a sampling of 5 different wines, some New World, some Old World, just to see, this is such a kind of transparent grape, and how it, really pulls the characteristics from the soil almost more than many other wines. And it's been a process. We did blind tastings. We really wanted to land on what profile we were looking for. Napa is not conducive for Chardonnay, but we wanted to stay somewhat local, and KK found an untapped vineyard at the base of Sonoma Mountain. And we were discussing yesterday, this notion of reductive whites. And I don't think that's what we're aiming for. We want sort of mineral freshness, but something has a restraint and a kind of tension to it that is exciting to us.
Yeah. It was really interesting tasting that you put together, where we had, you said 5 Chardonnays, and we had a champagne to have champagne, because why not?
Yeah.
But among the styles, they were all unique Chardonnays, yours included. I certainly noticed that the one that was universally either taken or finished was yours, which is nice to see. But it was, to your point, it wasn't reductive, it wasn't oxidative, it was mineral driven, it was fresh. Yours stood out in a way that it was so very enjoyable. There's so many people out there that will say, I don't like Chardonnay or I don't like American Chardonnay. I think
It
they mean
gets a
they
bad
don't,
rap.
yeah.
I want to go back a bit to the estate as a whole. I mean, obviously, such a historic and monumental property in the world of wine. There's got to be some pressure to like continue that legacy, but then also make your own. And you've done that through the biodynamic farming, the art. What's next on? And now white wine, putting that under the name too. So, what does the future hold for?
Well, I look to KK in large part because she's a total, she's absolutely vital in this discussion. I would love to do something in another hemisphere. I think New Zealand, just also just from a scheduling perspective, like she could actually work 2 hemispheres successfully. She is very drawn to Saint-Emilion. And I'm like,
Saint-Emilion
let's
is an
look,
amazing place.
So we have our ears to the ground, but our team is so small. We're only 5 people.
Yeah.
So I would necessarily have to make some changes there. And I really love this moment right now where there's just such intimacy and connection to what we do.
Yeah.
Well, when you have like a small team like that, you're often like really much on the same page and you share a language and, almost a unseen, unheard language or communication, between each other.
But another answer to your question would be, I'm just really thinking on the hospitality piece and how we can, Dawn never received visitors and, unless it was like a VIP person coming through and, we have the permit to do so. And I'm like, how do I best share this? It is such a different experience when people actually see the property and like they have a complete sort of aha moment around the wines when they can really see the vineyard and the relationship to like Hennessy. I mean, it is a really distinctive property, as you said. I mean, we're the northernmost property on Pritchard Hill. We have the most direct maritime influence, which affects
so much
the system in such an extraordinary way. And I would love to share that. So I've been, doing some renovation of the main building, and then I'm redoing a hospitality area so I can receive people a little bit more in my style of hospitality,
And art is going to come into those spaces too,
It will.
I'm assuming.
Yes. Yes.
With all the various pathways you've had, from the art and the ballet and now winemaking and film producing, is there a section of art that you're like, or life that you're like, I'm going to dive into this next?
I've been studying meditation, and I am looking to do some bigger travel. So I'm hoping to go to Bhutan this Christmas, and hopefully going to a sacred music festival in India in February. And I have some dear friends who are doing some interesting work in Egypt. So yeah, these kinds of learnings. I'm
a continuous learner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And will you bring, what do you, or do you expect or just wait for inspiration to what you can carry back to the vineyard?
I thought there was a beautiful comment at the session earlier today where Karen and John were talking about landing in Virginia and how quieting down and letting the land tell them what it had to offer and just, the bounty of that. And I just think, the world has so much to offer us.
Continue to travel, live life, take it all in and bring it back home, right?
Yes. You think about winemaking, I mean, the tradition, it goes back 8,000 years. It's endured. So I'm only a small part of that conversation.
God willing, it will continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being with us today. I don't know how people procure the wines that are so special, but is there a mailing list or a place where they can land, or do they hope to find it on a restaurant menu?
I mean, there is a sign up element on the website.
Awesome.
And we do have a phone. People can call and have a conversation. So,
Yeah.
How delightfully old-fashioned.
yes.
Love that. Awesome. And we'll put things in the show notes as far as where to find you and on any sort of social media or
Thank you.
that sort of thing. And looking forward to seeing the film come out and the Chardonnay.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Beautiful to be here.